And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, September 17th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the $ icon in the chat. This will help create a super chat of any thoughts or comments you may want to see being put out on the live broadcast. I will acknowledge it, and it just makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day as we put out content for you guys each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us. And also the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show, recap last night's Monday night game between the Eagles and the Falcons. The Falcons coming back late, defeating the Eagles 22-21. So we'll get into the specifics of it. In the second part of the show, I'll get into the news that broke yesterday that Bryce Young of the Carolina Panthers is going to be benched, and Andy Dalton will now be the starting quarterback for the Panthers this upcoming week against the Raiders. So we'll get into that. Also, we'll talk about the latest injury news. So it's likely that Cooper Kupp is going to go on IR. We'll also talk about Deebo Samuel missing a couple of games, one of the wide receivers for the 49ers. So we'll talk about that impact. Already, after week 2, got a ton of major injuries around the league. So, of course, that doesn't change. Then in the fourth part of the show, we'll talk about the Ravens and their loss to the Raiders. Raiders had a 10-point comeback. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll get into talking about the Sunday night game, the Texans and the Bears, and I'll give you my thoughts on that. A very low-scoring game, but we'll talk about that as well. So with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is recapping last night's game between the Eagles and the Falcons. So both teams, one team coming off of a loss, one team coming off of a win, although I didn't think the Eagles looked particularly good in the game against the Packers. The Falcons just, they didn't look good against the Steelers. Kyle Pitts did score a touchdown in that game, but Kirk Cousins did not look great. However, he did look better last night. It didn't get off to a great start, but Kirk Cousins did finish this game strong, and the Eagles were without A.J. Brown in this game. Also, I thought it was interesting on the very first drive of the game. Excuse me. On the very first drive of the game, they didn't use Saquon Barkley once. Very interesting play calling. Hurts did complete his first pass for 15 yards, but then there was a penalty, and then Hurts ran the ball for 1 yard, pass to Covey on the second play, and then it was a designed run on 3rd and 10. Very interesting play calling, and the crowd was booing already right out of the jump. So Eagles probably weren't happy to hear that. Then the Falcons, they got their first possession, and Kirk Cousins didn't really do anything in that offense. They went 5 plays, and they eventually punted. Then the Eagles put together a nice drive, got into field goal range, but then they opted to go for it on 4th and 4 at the Falcons' 9. They didn't get it. So that's an opportunity that came back to bite them later in the game, as you see the score here. Both teams exchanged punts. Then the Falcons put together a field goal drive, 8 plays, 52 yards, almost 4 minutes of time of possession. Some chunk plays in this drive. Cousins connected with Drake London for 19 yards, connected with Algier for 12 yards. Algier had a 15-yard run in this game. Also got banged up at one point. I saw him limping off the field. Cousins and Bijan Robinson, there was a miscommunication, I guess, on the play, and it was a fumble, but Bijan was able to recover it. But yeah, Younghoe Koo, who had a nice game, kicked a 39-yard field goal to make it 3-0 Falcons. Then the Eagles put together a touchdown drive, 11 plays, 70 yards down the field, and Hurts connected with Devontae Smith for a 7-yard touchdown to make it 7-3. Then the Falcons, they went on a 15-play, 82-yard drive, a little over 5 minutes of time of possession down the field, and that was yet another Younghoe Koo field goal to make it 7-6. So that's what the score was at the half. And then there was all scoring drives in the third quarter. The Falcons, they opened it up with the field goal drive. Younghoe Koo, a 34-yard field goal to make it 9-7. Then the Eagles, they answered with the field goal drive to make it 10-9. Jake Elliott kicked a 29-yarder. And then this was a big play in the game. Well, actually, before that, so the Falcons actually went for it on 4th and 4 from their own 47. And I was saying, why are they doing this? But then it ended up working. See, the thing is, if that doesn't happen, if they don't convert, it's a bad call, but they ended up going for it and getting it. So it ended up working out, so that was a good call by them. You say that now because it works. Kirk Cousins connected with Ray McLeod for 12 yards. And Kirk actually missed him earlier in the game. I think he hit an underneath route with Drake London, but Ray McLeod was behind the defense. So if Kirk saw him, if he had enough time, and saw him, that could have been a touchdown as well. But then on the very next play, after the 4th down conversion, Kirk Cousins connected with Darnell Mooney for 41 yards, and that ended up being a 41-yard touchdown. So that was a big play in the game, and also big for my fantasy matchup because my friend had Bijan Robinson and Drake London, and I had Kirk Cousins, and it was literally like neck and neck at that point. So that really changed the momentum for him, going in my favor, which was great. They went for 2, didn't get it. But yeah, so it was 15-10. Then the Eagles, they answered a 9.5-minute drive. 17 plays, 70 yards down the field. And the tush push ended up happening as Jalen Hurts, 1-yard touchdown. And then Saquon Barkley got the 2-point conversion. Now, originally, Barkley scored a touchdown on 3rd and 3 from the 5, but he was ruled down just shy of the goal line. So, yeah, the Eagles ended up scoring, so that made it 18-15. And then the Falcons, they turned it over on downs. Bijan Robinson ended up getting stuffed at the Atlanta 39. And interesting because C.J. Gardner-Johnson's helmet came off, so there should have been some kind of flag that was thrown, but that ended up not happening. I know some people were saying that. But yeah, it looked like the game was over at that point. And then this is where, Eagle fans are just, lost some sleep last night. So they got into field goal range. It was 3rd and 3. Falcons had no timeouts left. They were at the Eagles were at the Falcons 10. And Saquon Barkley's wide open. It would have been a first down. The game would have been over. And he drops it. So then the Eagles had to kick a field goal. Jake Elliott from 28 yards out. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I have a feeling that the Falcons are going to go down the field. This is definitely going to bite them. And sure enough, that's what happened. The Falcons went 6 plays, 70 yards. Cousins hit Kyle Pitts for 11 yards. Darnell Mooney for 21. Darnell Mooney again for 26. He had a big game. Drake London for 5. And then he connected with Drake London on the touchdown from 7 yards out to put them up by 1. They went for 2, or no, actually no, they got the extra point because that tied the game. So that put them ahead. And then on the first play of the Eagles drive, Hurts connected with Dallas Goedert for 13 yards, but then he was ultimately intercepted on the next play by Jesse Bates. And the Falcons get the win. And to look at the final stats for both teams, so Kirk Cousins was 20 of 29 for 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Bijan Robinson had a big game, 14 carries for 97 yards. He also had 25 yards receiving in this game. Tyler Algier, 9 carries for 53 yards. Darnell Mooney had a big game, 3 receptions for 88 yards and a touchdown. Drake London had 6 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. Ray McLeod, 3 for 42. Kyle Pitts only had 3 for 20. Falcons only had 1 sack in this game. Jesse Bates, of course, with the game-sealing interception. And then as for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, 23 of 30, 183 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Saquon Barkley, 22 carries for 95 yards. He also had 21 yards receiving. Jalen Hurts had 13 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. So, between Barkley and Hurts and also Kenneth Gainwell, they ran the ball for almost 200 yards in the game. Devontae Smith was their leading receiver, of course, with no A.J. Brown, 7 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert had 3 for 38. Britton Covey had 6 receptions for 23 yards. And the Eagles as a team only had one sack. They could not get any pressure on Kirk Cousins. So yeah, Falcons pick up a win. That's a huge win because next week they play the Chiefs, and that's going to be a tough game if you fall to 0-2. And then as for the Eagles, they play the Saints in New Orleans, so that's going to be a very tough game. But yeah, the Eagles' defense was not great. Could not get any pressure. Like I said, also the back end struggled, giving up those big plays. Yeah, I really did not like. I really have not liked what I've seen from the Eagles so far. I was high on them going into the season. I know they won in week 1, but it wasn't pretty. And Jalen Hurts continues to turn the ball over. Now that was late in the game, but yeah, I have some concerns with the Eagles. They don't look right at the moment. Saquon still had a good game, but that drop was crucial. And it's one of those things like, look, you go for the win. I get it, but the Falcons had no timeouts left. So if you run the ball, I mean, they have even less time to go down the field as fast as they did. So you probably run the ball there, drain the clock, and then you have, Jake Elliott kick the field goal. But they didn't do that. I mean, Barkley should have caught it, but I think he's the least of their problems right now. They brought in Bryce Huff to be that replacement to Hassan Reddick. Doesn't seem like he's really living up to that potential, living up to that replacement. The back end is struggling, and the offense misses A.J. Brown. I think that's one thing I could point to is that, yeah, it's just they don't look good right now. As for the Falcons, I mean, that was a big win for them. I give Kirk Cousins a lot of credit for that game-winning drive. I mean, because they went right down the field. The Eagles were just, making sure they weren't giving up the big plays, but it didn't matter. I mean, the Falcons just tore apart that defense on that last drive. But that's a big momentum game for them because, you don't want to go 0-2 and then going up against the Chiefs, which is a home game next week. But they were able to get the job done. And, yeah, that's... and Kirk Cousins, it's interesting. So Troy Aikman was talking to him, and Cousins says he's healthy, but he's not 100% yet, which I thought was interesting. But you know what? It's going to take some time, but this definitely gives him and that team a lot of confidence going forward because Philly's a hard place to play. And once again, and we're going to talk about another matchup a little bit later in the show, but I said, well, Kirk Cousins played well against the Eagles last year, but now this is with the new team. I don't know if he's going to be able to get it done. And it's on Monday night. He got it done. Him and the Falcons got it done. And, yeah, so congrats to them on the win. And as for the Eagles, they got some things that they got to clean up. So we'll see what happens. And A.J. Brown is expected to miss more than just this week. So that's big going forward. So we're going to take our first break. And when we come back, we will talk about the Panthers benching Bryce Young. We'll talk about the impact of that going forward for them. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.